On behalf of El Centro and HSI, welcome to our two-part student-led equity talk series titled From Voice to Power, Students as Leaders, Knowledge Holders, and Change Agents. For 30 years, El Centro has served as a hub of organized activities and resources that support student transition, retention, graduation, and academic advancement. Through campus and community partnerships, the mission of El Centro is to promote a critical understanding of Chicanx and Latinx communities within the United States and internationally. As our former Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Francisco Hernandez, who helped support the development of the center, once shared, there were pockets of energy that we needed to bring together. El Centro became and still is a unifying place, a place to take students from being mad about something to I'm going to do something about it. Today, you will hear directly from our student leaders who draw upon their cultural strengths, their lived experiences, and community knowledge to organize impactful programs that foster belonging, support retention, and strengthen our campus climate and servingness here at UC Santa Cruz. They will share their frameworks and approaches that have been sustained across generations of former Centro directors, coordinators, and hundreds of student interns. Our focus today is on how we work alongside students in ways that recognize them as knowledge holders and creators, how we balance both process and outcome, the relationships, the care and nurturing alongside effective programs and services, and what students gain when they are empowered as partners and change agents within the university. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Jocelyn and Gio.
Hello, muy buenas tardes. My name is Jocelyn Salgado, or Josie for short. Let me go to that slide actually. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I'm a third year here at UCSC, double majoring in critical race and ethnic studies and education, democracy, and justice. I'm first gen, I'm from East Oakland, and I'm a proud product of ethnic studies and a proud daughter of immigrants from Jalisco and Michoacán, Mexico. On campus, I am an HSI Servingness Research Scholar with CREA, or the Collaborative Research for Equity and Action Lab, under the mentorship of Dr. Rebecca Covarrubias. And I am a lead student program coordinator with El Centro, our Chicanx Latina Resource Center, where I support with programming, peer supervision, fiscal management, and get to do many other exciting and meaningful things like this, for example. And so I'll pass it over to Jean.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for making time to hear us talk today. My name is Gio Fernandez. I use they, them, ea pronouns. Some of the things that I'm proud of, my identifiers, I am a queer Central American student and also proudly a product of immigrant families and an immigrant myself. I am deeply rooted in understanding and serving my community and the entire diaspora, and how we can better, co-create knowledge and have a more just future, especially within my studies here at UCSC. I'm a fourth year psychology student and minoring in education, democracy, and justice. So I feel like a lot of those things go hand in hand. And within El Centro, I am a lead student programming coordinator as well. So handling a lot of the things that Josie said, helping people put on programs, helping with fiscal management, and taking on other projects and developing my own interests as well. So yeah, really happy to be here today.
Yeah, so our presentation today is Servingness in Acción, Nurturing Student Leadership Rooted in Cariño, Cultura y Comunidad. We presented this in March at ASI, or the Alliance of Hispanic Serving Institution Educators Best Practices Conference. And so you might hear us reference that later on.
Here's an overview of our time today. So I'll just go ahead and read the learning outcomes. The first one is to identify culturally sustaining and student-centered practices, analyze the impact of student internships through testimonios, and apply strategies to strengthen the co-creation and servingness efforts. So first, I'll be talking a bit about El Centro's history and mission and what we do, who we are. And then Josie will lead you all through grounding frameworks and really important concepts that guide our interactions. and then I will elaborate on some of the student-centered practices that we see day to day within this like mentorship relationship. And then Josie will talk about the impact that student interns have shared with us and want to share with you all, and a call to action. And then at the very end, some reflection questions from us, and as well as like a general Q&A for all of you.
Thank you, Gio. And before we begin, we want to acknowledge that at a time when more students are excluded from DACA and the Opportunity for All bill was rejected here in California, undocumented students remain systematically barred from campus employment. And without work authorization, many are shut out of paid research, internships, and professional opportunities. On our campus, El Centro is one of the few spaces where undocumented students can access career development through fellowship funding. We also want to acknowledge that undocumented students have always been at the forefront of undocumented movements. They've led the fight for legislation, protections, and policies in our favor. And in our own institution, students have also led advocacy efforts to meet their basic needs, and it's an ongoing thing. Fear-mongering has never stopped them from organizing, advocating, and leading these movimientos. So we're calling for solidarity. We urge our institutions to eliminate unnecessary and harmful barriers to employment and professional opportunities for undocumented students. And we call on programs and organizations, departments to be intentional and creative in how they include undocumented students in initiatives and leadership. Their voices deserve to be centered and uplifted, and the work that they've always done deserves to be recognized and compensated.
Thank you, Josie, for reading that institutional call. Now I'll be talking a bit about El Centro's history. Since 1995, El Centro Chicanx Latinx Resource Center has been a hub that strives for the success of all Latina students. By 2012, the Latina undergraduate enrollment at UCSC reached 25%, which made us the third UC to become an HSI, or a Hispanic Serving Institution. And this milestone was really the result of years of outreach by students, staff, faculty, alongside the continued growth of the Latina population in California. And what we try to do here is amplify student retention, success, and ease transition through culturally relevant programs, outreach visits, various opportunities for interns, and collaboration with other student organizations. And integrated into all of our programming are efforts that raise the awareness of the social, political, economic, historical, and cultural realities that our communities face. Thank you. And who we serve students from various backgrounds. So that's diversity in ethnicity, culture, language assimilation, generational levels, different socioeconomic class, and immigration statuses. And we honor and respect the many ways in which our community members choose to self-identify, and all of the histories that they carry into our space are highly valued. And I'll also give a little bit of context about our current structure and how many people we have on our team today. We are a team of 23, and this is broken down into 3 full-time staff, 14 student programming coordinators, and 6 equipo interns, which, for context, our equipo is a student advisory team within El Centro, and it was launched just this academic year, built with the guidance of the Pasadena City College's Student Advisory Equipo, which for us was funded this year by the Title V HSI Cultura grant. And yeah, that's a bit about our team. And then I also wanted to acknowledge and call into this space the people who have poured so much into making it what it is, because who we're able to serve is possible because of not just like our student population and community, but also, again, like the team from the past and present. So we wanted to shout out our past directors, such as Larry Trujillo, Rosie Cabrera, and Dr. Judy Estrada. We wanted to honor our current amazing director, Xiomara, past and current program coordinators, past and current interns, all of whom have contributed to the co-creation of this beautiful space. And now, to add to who we are as your presenters today and our connection to El Centro, because it is a deeply personal thing, the ways in which we have arrived here as undergrads. For this, I reflected a lot about what made a meaningful mentor throughout my life and throughout my educational journey specifically. It is that community, family, friends, all the people that really delivered me here. And I was reading a little bit of Bell Hooks All About Love as well, and I think her chapter on loving communion um really is like the breath that I hope lives through all of us and like all the people that I can interact with to come. Um, Coming out of high school, I'm from the San Gabriel Valley area. I realize I never mentioned where I was from or anything, but I come from LA County, from a little suburb city called Hacienda Heights, and it is largely made up of really amazing immigrant communities, mainly like Hispanic and Latino. And so coming here, it was definitely a shift, and I was struggling a lot. I had to appeal my admission twice, but I knew that I had to like prove something to myself, and that education was the route that I did want to take. Um, but yeah, I was struggling a lot coming into college, but I was able to find my footing at the very least academically in the first 2 years. But I found myself struggling still a lot with imposter phenomenon, as I'm sure many students and all of you have shared at some point in your life in your professional careers. And so I wanted something to give me meaningful work. And I thrive. I feel like I have something meaningful to contribute to. And so I took that step to like start searching, understanding the resources, how to apply for jobs. And I saw an opening for a Central Americans programming coordinator at El Centro. And I was like, I haven't even gone to an El Centro event, but I read the mission statement, I read the values, and I was deeply, deeply drawn to being part of this space. And it is without a doubt that like my acceptance into this space is what kept me here and what helped me like find my purpose and even deeper love for what I was studying as well. And then I thought about the mentors, and I think that the common thread throughout my life is having people who were able to accept all of me, all of the things that I was questioning in the system, all of the things that I was mad about, all of the things that I was happy about and curious about, was nurtured by educators who wanted to see me grow instead of just kind of like focusing on performance or what I could or couldn't do. It was a genuine connection that carried me here and that I think really um, is shown through the model that we'll share with you.
Thank you for sharing. I was just sharing with the CREA team last week that I've been sort of like in this reflective state of mind lately, where I've come across certain pictures in my camera roll from like years ago, and they somehow are related to the work that I get to do now. And so it's been really beautiful because it feels like the universe is letting me know that I'm like exactly where I'm supposed to be. And so the pictures that I put on this slide are me and my mom when I graduated from the program that changed my life. And then a screenshot of an email that I sent that also changed my life and that I'll get into. But one of my favorite stories to tell is how I got to UCSC and how I got connected with El Centro, because I get to talk about all of the amazing people that were and are a part of this journey. I didn't arrive here alone, and I'm so fortunate to say that I'm not navigating it alone either. In the midst of struggling in high school, I was accepted into my high school's ethnic studies, social justice academy, which was where I was introduced to ethnic studies. And I had like a handful of caring, revolutionary, loving educators. And so those factors coupled together completely changed the trajectory of my life. The effects were evident in my motivation, and my sudden drive to not want to let down the people that believed in me. And also like in my grades, like my GPA increased and I ended up being like barely eligible to apply to UCs. So when I was 17 and I was like navigating, choosing what college to commit to, I was actually pretty settled on a different institution, which was a CSU, and it was closer to home. But one of my amazing educators at the time encouraged me to visit and to reach out to people at UCSC. And so I did. A week before decision day, I sent an email, this email that would change my life and that would get me to where I am. It was a lengthy email to El Centro, to Xiomara, our director, and Dr. Judy as well, our former director. And I'll read the last part so y'all can understand how I was like approaching this. So this was from April 21st, 2023. Having a sense of community is extremely important to me and definitely something I'm taking into consideration as I make my decision. As a Latina who struggled in K through 12 schooling, I didn't believe I would be accepted into a UC, and now I'm facing uncertainty about belonging. I would deeply appreciate if someone talked with me in person about the resources and support for Latina students at UCSC. And I'll keep it short. But a few days later, my mom and I chatted and met with Xiomara and Jaylene, who was our previous program coordinator. And it was a very emotional conversation on my end. I was coming in with a lot of questions, a lot of like self-doubt and worries. But long story short, I ended up saying yes to UCSC later that same day. And it was that conversation with them and their affirmations and the validation and the cariño that I felt that made me feel like I would be okay and well supported at UCSC. And so fast forward to now, I get to work with El Centro. I get to work alongside such authentically caring people, people who do not separate their heart and spirit from their work. On the contrary, those are crucial components of it. They bring me so much hope, and their presence in my life has been so transformative, so crucial to my retention, to my academic persistence at UCSC, and to my overall holistic well-being. During a keynote at ASI, Dr. Gina Ann Garcia and Dr. Mara Lopez said something like, work without the heart and spirit is transactional. And so we want to invite you all to think of work with the heart and spirit as transformative and leading with cariño as transformative. And with that, I'll begin with our grounding frameworks. So again, I'm very fortunate to say that my studies and the work that I do are really interconnected, and it's work that feeds my soul because it's really meaningful to me, because it's relevant to my life. And in the literature that I've come across, I've had so many moments where I read something like a framework or a pedagogical practice, and it's like gold to me because it gives me the language to name my experiences. And so all this to say that I did sense making here with this, and I was thinking of servingness and the question of like, how are we showing up for students in ways that affirm who they are, sustain their communities, and support their holistic success? And I came across this book a few months ago called Authentic Cariño, Transformative Schooling for Latinx Youth. And it's by Marnie Curry with a foreword by Angela Valenzuela. And as I started to read it, I felt that same thing of like I've experienced this, and I've experienced this within my internship with El Centro. Curry describes Authentic Cariño as a deep, genuine care that forms the basis of relational practice, oriented towards humanizing students by addressing their holistic needs and incorporating a critical examination of cultural and political contexts. So it's a framework that assembles a trenza, or a braid, of 3 expressions of care. And those expressions of care are familial cariño, intellectual cariño, and critical cariño. And some of the values and nurtures of Authentic Cariño, she says, are embracing care and justice as indivisible, political clarity, attending to and affirming ethno-racial identity, nourishing wholeness of body, mind, spirit, and collective transformation. And so what we've done here is again, if we think about it as a braid or a trenza, we've thickened each of the strands with some of El Centro's grounding frameworks and other concepts to contextualize how we enact servingness through a culture of authentic cariño, keeping cariño, cultura, y comunidad at the center of our programming and our initiatives, but also at the heart of the internship experience itself. So if we think of servingness as the institutional commitment to holistically serving students, then we can think of authentic cariño as to how that commitment is embodied in practice, in relationships and programming and mentorship, and in nurturing student leadership development. And so we hope to provide some best practices, strategies, recommendations that others can adopt and adapt in their work with students, whether that be in your classroom or with your interns or research assistants, in general with the students that you serve or work alongside. So what I'll do is I'll stay at this conceptual level before Gio walks us through what this looks like in practice and how we enact these forms of cariño. So first, familial cariño. So I'll begin with defining Razalogía, which is a framework developed by Roberto Vargas in 1984. He describes Razalogía as a community learning method for creating knowledge, nurturing personal and collective power, and advancing social transformation by sharing life experiences rooted in family, cultura, y comunidad. He says, nuestra experiencia es nuestra escuela. So when we center Razalogía in our internship experience, we affirm that knowledge is not just rooted in Western epistemologies, but that it lives in our lived experience, in collective memory, in land, in spirit, in culture, and community. We honor Chicanx, Latine, and indigenous ways of knowing by treating students' histories, struggles, and cultural narratives as legitimate. And this also shapes how our interns engage with one another. Our peer-to-peer relationships are these spaces of collective care that cultivate what we call academically sustaining networks. So essentially these support systems that foster long-term mentorship, professional navigation, leadership development that extends beyond graduation. These networks sustain our students holistically. And so this is where intellectual cariño comes in. We engage community cultural wealth, drawing from Tarayoso's framework by recognizing and leveraging students' aspirational, linguistic, familial, social, navigational, and resistant forms of capital. We honor intergenerational bendiciones by framing academic success as a collective, multi-generational process. And we center the LACRIT principle of experiential knowledge by positioning students' lived experiences as essential to meaning-making and analysis. And in doing so, we advance the co-construction of knowledge where students are not just these empty vessels to be filled, as I think Paulo Freire writes, but they're actively involved in knowledge production. And so Critical Cariño communicates to students that our worlds matter beyond academics, and that our education should prepare us to confront and transform structural inequalities. Through Critical Cariño, we foster critical consciousness by supporting students in analyzing and challenging systems of oppression. We prepare them to navigate dominant discourses without abandoning their home cultures. We intentionally reframe higher ed as a liberatory space committed to justice and humanization. And most importantly, we position students as leaders of institutional transformation. So our interns don't just benefit from Servingness, but they're actively producing Servingness. They contribute to Servingness on our campus by mentoring their peers, by strengthening community cultural affirmation, shaping programming, and influencing how El Centro and the broader institution understand and respond to Latina students' need. So they help co-create these spaces where students have these validating experiences. And to tie it all together, beyond the sense of belonging, this trenza of Authentic Cariño nurtures the collective struggle toward rightful presence at El Centro and the broader campus community. I discovered this framework thanks to Dr. Eduardo Mosqueda last quarter. I took his immigrants in education class, and we talked a lot about assimilation and belonging. And I had just been introduced to like the politics of belonging or problematizing belonging. And so I remember I went to his office hours and I was like, if not belonging, then what? You know, like, and that's not allowed to say that belonging isn't important, but I was just searching for something different. And so he recommended I do my research on rightful presence, and I did. And so essentially, throughout our educational journeys, Latina students have been sort of like implicitly invited to conform to institutional norms and standards that require us to abandon essential parts of our humanity, including our home languages, our cultural heritage, and ways of knowing in exchange for a sense of belonging. And so belonging can sometimes feel like this very conditional thing for marginalized students navigating a predominantly or historically white institution. And so rightful presence is more than feeling included. It's deeply rooted in justice and cariño. Rightful presence disrupts systemic inequities through a shift in power. And so in this shift in power, students, families, and communities who more frequently experience injustice become crucial to the shaping and the design of educational systems, policies, and practices. Rightful presence promotes the co-creation of experiences that could benefit students, educators, staff, families, and communities. And so again, the emphasis here is not to adjust students to an institution, but to transform institutions in relation to the communities that they claim to serve. So by breeding spirit, mind, and body, home, school, and the community, and the social, economic, and political, we advance an expansive vision of education as what Bell Hooks calls a liberatory home place. And within this environment, our interns are affirmed in their agency and their rightful presence. They're reminded that they don't have to detach, fragment, or compartmentalize their identities in order to thrive in college or succeed in the workforce or in grad school, et cetera, wherever it is they go. Al contrario, right? The knowledge that students carry from their lived experiences, from their homes, from their cultures is essential to their own success. It's essential to meaningful campus and community engagement, and it's essential to transforming the inequities that shape our institutions.
Thank you so much, Josie. Each time that I've heard this in practice, y'all, I'm always blown away by how beautifully she has woven all this information together. So for my portion now, I will be focusing more on how is this embodied in our day-to-day practices within our specific space and our mentorship style, as well as like the programming aspect of it. And to start with that, I will go with our structure and this beautiful graphic of a garden bed that my supervisor Des made during our training this year. And I think this is one of the ways that embodies reciprocity and care, which is a really big part of the Authentic Cariño framework. that we just told you all about. And so this is kind of describing like the way that we decide to like share power. It's really intentional and it's a more horizontal approach to sharing power in the workplace, and it helps to empower the students and foster their growth and leadership skills in a much more impactful way. And so we have the garden beds being our 3 full-time pro staff, which are Xiomara, Des, and Camila, and the people that carry essential knowledge, the tools, the funds, and the frameworks that help our student programming interns fully realize their ideas. They're the ones who are blooming, who are bringing all of these different varieties and different interests and needs that need to be addressed on campus. And then the Bs are us as lead student interns. And we are the ones who are kind of like always in this facilitating this exchange of information, guiding where we can. And it's a very symbiotic relationship. It's a continuous cycle to provide and help knowledge to realize and maybe integrate a lot of the projects and visions into our institution for years to come. And I know this is a lot of flowery language, but this system works and it has a lot to do with intentional practices that I will elaborate on further. The next slide. Thanks. So yeah, these student-centered practices, the garden and embodying care, as I said before, these horizontal organizations allow for students and interns to realize that they have all of the skills that are needed to take on these projects. And it also points to a really large part of the Centro model, which is our guiding values in the workplace. And it emphasizes the importance of collective care as a catalyst for our success. And within this, as a mentor and mentee relationship, I think a really good question to ask is, in our check-in spaces and in just the whole process of like our academic year and what we do, what do your check-ins look like? What do the team meetings feel like? How is your capacity to get to know like the deeper details of your mentees, your students, and your team members in that day? I think is a really important part of what makes our relationships trusting and authentic and able to motivate each other through all of the hardships, because we all know it's not easy to navigate these spaces. And the more transparency and honesty that there is, the easier it feels to get through those kinds of things or roadblocks if there's any. And so that also takes me to mentorship rooted in reciprocity. We really prioritize holistic well-being, and our team uplifts all of these trenzas through advising style that supports students academically, professionally, and personally. Yes. Servingness in Acción. I'll also talk a little bit and break down the way that these practices show up in our initiatives and the things that we put on throughout the year. To start, we have a lot of really large annual events, such as Dia de los Muertos Ceremonia, Pachanga, and our Chicano Latino year-end ceremony. These are some of the first initiatives that we learn about as student interns, and the ways that we get to learn and expand our interests and have the guided mentorship in every step of the way. There are skills being developed in learning how to acquire funds, learning about budgets, learning about timelines and organizational skills, outreach, all of these moving parts that are said in us having the skills and like the power, or like the creative power to also see and adapt how we want that as each year goes on. And then I also really wanted to highlight some current and new programs that are also super reflective of the things that students want to see and the connections that they create with like the broader community and people who have came and left this space. It comes to professional development. So one of the programs, for example, was pre-law and pastries, which one of our interns one of our interns put on last year, and as well as Abriendo Caminos in Psychology, which are all about career readiness. And these were projects that were taken on to address what job searching is like for graduating students or for students who are still curious about like developing a very specific career interest. And what this was able to do is to position students to create the resources and the spaces that they want to see that are culturally relevant, and to make lasting connections between our community members and other alum, as well as other resource centers on campus like Career Success and other student organizations as well. Some other initiatives that are that we wanted to highlight were Aquí estamos y no nos vamos. And I found that this specific program and other programs like this are another opportunity to center student voices and our community cultural wealth, while also realizing a lot of the systemic barriers and, honestly, naming how it is, a lot of the racial and discrimination practices that people still encounter on campus, because these are very real things. Knowing how to respond and help facilitate like a healing process in a meaningful way was very clear in this program. And to give context to what I'm talking about, this was a pop-up that we had last year in response to a student, a community member of ours who had experienced a targeted crime for her status and for her assumed status and for her identity as a Latina. And what came from this event was a display and opportunity for students to get resources, get to know her, and to learn more about the myths of what it means to be an undocumented student on campus. And I think that it is important to regularly check in and like understand the climate and needs of the student in order to respond in a meaningful way and in a lasting way. And then, yeah. The other initiative that we have on here is Art 139, the Murals and Movements class, which on the screen is the mural that is now up in the arts area that was revealed last year. And this was a really important and amazing achievement from El Centro's efforts with other students and other orgs on campus. They wanted to address gaps in representation within the curriculum. 27% of the art majors here are made up of Latinos, but there wasn't any course that was like highlighting that heritage and the contributions of Latino artists. And the beautiful thing about this class, which is still here, it's also being taken this quarter, I think Josie's in the class too, is to uplift student artists in their careers by making meaningful artwork, making meaningful relationships in this process, and celebrating the contributions, the histories, and the realities right now of our community.
Oh, this is me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gio. After hearing about the advisory structure and some of the powerful programming initiatives, we want to now share what we've learned directly from our interns. In a survey last year, students were asked to reflect on their experiences in the internship, and these are some of the themes that emerged. First, belonging, community, and retention. Students consistently described peer-to-peer relationships as these spaces or as central, to their well-being and their academic persistence. And during times of uncertainty, especially, these relationships were protective. Interns described building a deep sense of community and not just these temporary professional connections. They wrote in their testimonials about a culture of shared motivation that encouraged them to persist. And we have also agency and rightful presence. Students expressed that the internship validated their lived experiences and positioned them as contributors. Several interns reflected that they felt like they were actively contributing to Servingness on our campus and for other Latina students at UCSC. and they develop their confidence. They develop confidence in their ability to improve institutional practices and support their peers. They also reported an increased access to resources and greater confidence navigating institutional systems. And finally, leadership development. Students shared that as a result of the internship, they felt more confident navigating professional environments, whether that meant interviews, resume building, applications, networking, or articulating career goals. Others reflected on how the experience allowed them to grow, to critically reflect on their backgrounds, their privileges and challenges, and to clarify what they want to pursue after graduation. I think something that's important to note here is that this leadership development didn't require students to shed parts of themselves to become professional. Instead, they described integrating their identities more fully into their aspirations. So this tells us that this tells us that when Authentic Cariño is centered in work with students, it influences how they see themselves. It shapes their sense of belonging, their confidence, their voice, their agency, and it's part of what carries them beyond this campus. So whatever it is or wherever it is they go after graduation, Authentic Cariño helps cultivate skills and ways of being that extend into their careers and their lives. How to build relationships, how to lead with empathy, how to move in community with others. So essentially, it's about developing as whole people and as leaders. And we see this most clearly when students are trusted as leaders, when they're invited into these decision-making spaces, when the power is shared, and when their lived experiences or experiential knowledge is recognized and valued as genuine expertise. And we should trust students in these decision-making, right? Because students are living these realities in real time. And then before Gio shares student testimonials, I wanted to talk a little bit about mine because I talk about how I got connected with El Centro and how fortunate I am. But to share a little bit of my testimonio, I didn't start working with El Centro until my second year here. And my freshman year was rough, not gonna lie. And so before I actually started working here, I was so nervous and I was so worried that I wouldn't be able to manage like work on top of academics. Because I had already done a bad job of like time management in my first year, and it was evident in my grades. But it was actually as if I was like falling, and then all of a sudden like this net of like cariño like caught me before I hit the ground. I think there's something so beautiful about holding students to high expectations because you genuinely believe in them. And something even more beautiful about accompanying those high expectations with support, guidance, resources, love. There's something so beautiful about getting to know students, meeting them where they're at, and then co-constructing opportunities for their meaningful participation and their growth. And also in engaging in this meaningful work and getting to do it in community. And so these are all things I've experienced working with El Centro. And similar to when I was in high school, the impact is clear in my grades. My mom has also told me she sees like the growth and how I like have come out of my shell. And I also get to be a nerd. Like that's part of what I just mentioned, right? About like getting to know students and co-constructing these pathways for their participation. Like I get to nerd out, like Exhibit A, this presentation. I've also realized in my time working here that I want to go to grad school, and more than realizing it, I think I actually see it as a possibility now. And through mentoring, I'm more like knowledgeable about the process, right? And I feel prepared to take that on soon. And in terms of a future career, I know I want to work with students at some capacity. And for my values and practice and working alongside students to be shaped by the kind of cariño that I receive here. And for me to strive to provide to students this same guided reciprocity, validation, mentorship, critical hope. Yeah.
Thank you, Josie, for sharing your testimonial. Now I'll read two of the quotes that came from this testimonial from this survey. I appreciate being able to draw upon my cultural knowledge into the internship, as it demonstrated that all parts of my identity are valuable to supporting our work. I felt that I could bring my holistic being to the workplace and be seen and validated. And then an advisory equipo team says, spaces like El Centro are important during times of uncertainty and fear because it's a place where students can gather, organize, and empower one another to create change. It gives an opportunity to better understand our own needs and how we can work within the university and our existing resources in order to create the change we want to see.
Okay. And then we're near closing, but we wanted to close with an invitation to action. I think if we're serious about retention, graduation, post-graduation outcomes, and career readiness, if we're serious about servingness, then we have to be just as serious and intentional as humanization, right? We must become ethnographers of the communities or the students that we serve. Not in a research sense per se, but in a relational sense, right? Like, do we know our students? Do we know their families, their communities, the greatest threats to their safety? And by safety, I don't just mean like physical safety, but also identity safety, like are students safe to show up to their internship, to their classroom, their job, their lab, etc., and be who they are culturally, linguistically, like holistically, right? Because again, if we care about academic outcomes, then we must authentically care for students as whole people. So this means building relationships with students by nurturing their community cultural wealth through notions of respeto, confianza, right, trust, authentic cariño, consejos, reciprocity, and moving from sympathy to solidarity. So not leading with like, oh, like I feel bad for you, but like I'm fighting alongside you because I recognize that in humanizing you, I'm humanizing myself. And this kind of work, this cariño, choosing to build these relationships or these authentic, caring relationships is an act of resistance, right? Because our institutions are shaped by individualism. It also means considering the wholeness and intersecting realities of students and responding proactively. And this includes practicing cultural modeling. Scholars refer to this as a kind of role modeling that, or way showing that demonstrates how to survive and thrive in educational spaces. So modeling how to navigate academic institutions while sustaining their cultural identities, languages, and their truths. And so it requires, one, the acknowledgement of students' potential, but also the active disruption of the conditions that question their right to be in our institutions of higher ed. So when we talk about positioning students as co-creators and decision makers, we have to be clear that this isn't about like inviting students into spaces without preparing or supporting them, right? Like we need each other. So it's not about like assigning tasks or projects for the sake of including students. I think part of the meaningfulness, is that a word or no? Part of the meaningfulness is in the guidance and the mentorship provided along the way, right? I think other scholars also call this acompañamiento. So students, it requires losing some power and letting go of hierarchical aspects that are inherent in relationships with students, right, as staff or faculty, and being advocates for their most marginalized students. And then I think Maria del Carmen Salazar also refers to this as institutional agents developing critical self-consciousness. So like kind of realizing your own role in upholding an equitable structure. And it's not because anyone intends harm, right? But because these systems are not designed with all of our students in mind. But again, these practices, these things are so ingrained in the very foundation of our institutions. And so this is an invitation to reflect on the systems that we're a part of and that shape everyday experiences and interactions. We have to interrogate our institutions and ask ourselves, where do deficit notions still live in our policies, in our language, and our assumptions? Where might we unintentionally be asking students to shrink themselves or assimilate in order to survive our institutions? And how can we engage critically with this authority and continually be in search of something better, right? And constantly be making the shifts necessary to improve student success. And I also want to acknowledge that there are people across our campus already doing this work, showing up with cariño, building relationships with students, being these way showers, right? So helping students navigate our institution as classed, gendered, cultured, raced individuals, and constantly asking students for their feedback to inform their response to student needs. Building relationships with other colleagues or collaborating across departments, programs, support services, all in an effort to support student success. And I think that's something I've noticed in conversation with my peers is that this kind of cariño is very localized, meaning it lives in specific programs, centers, or with specific individuals, rather than being something that students can experience consistently across the institution. So depending on where a student goes or who they encounter, their experience of care can look drastically different. And I also I feel like it's important to name the realities that we're navigating, right? Budget deficits or grant cuts, program consolidations, increasing workloads, limited capacity, competing priorities, or university-based measures of productivity. I think many institutions, though, have relied on committed individuals, staff, faculty, student leaders to hold this work, this important work for entire communities or student populations. And I think that when that's the case, especially under the conditions that I just mentioned, it becomes really difficult to sustain for both students and for the people doing this work, right? Like if we think of our campus as an ecosystem, as interconnected and interdependent, then when one part is stretched thin or when their positions disappear, then it impacts the whole ecosystem. It harms students, it harms staff, faculty, todos, right? So then I wonder then, what would it look like if, or what would it feel like if the responsibility were shared more collectively? Like, what if we increase the odds that every student receives the cariño necessary to flourish, and not just those who are fortunate enough to be in these certain spaces or come across certain people? So our invitation to all of us in this Zoom is let's think together about a shift from individual acts of care to institutional responsibility. Let's co-create caring, liberatory relationships inside institutions that were not built for that purpose. Let's connect our indignation about injustice with audacious, critical hope. Cy Stokes, I have the quote here, but Cy Stokes says in an article, the goal is not to belong, the goal is to find value and beauty within the struggle itself. It is our obligation to support Latinx students and other students of color in their collective journey toward freedom, even if that freedom is never realized. And I shared this at SC and again at a student panel this past weekend, but as a student and as hopefully a future educator, I carry this belief with me that I can change the world, right? Or that I can go into a space and bring meaningful change. And so if you're also a student with this mindset, I ask that you don't let anyone take that away from you. And to staff, faculty, admin, I invite you to reflect on what brought you into this work. And if it was the same belief that you could change the world or that you could build meaningful relationships with students, and then somewhere along the way, you lost hope after being met with realities like defunding, budget cuts, DEI surveillance, bureaucracies within our universities, emphasis on efficiency over relationship building. I ask that you revisit what brought you into this work, that you spark it, and now more than ever, I ask that you also let no one take that away from you, that you nurture it in your students, that you model it, and that you plant that same seed into them.
Had to give a moment to let all of that sink in. But with all of that and that invitation, I wanted to subsequently invite y'all to the reflection portion that we have today. And if you can feel free to just think about these answers, write them down in your own or for your own continuous revisiting, or even share in the chat today if you feel called to. But I'll just go ahead and read each question. Where in your daily practice is servingness most visible? How is it embodied in your meetings, syllabi, supervision, programming, etc.? What would rightful presence look like for student leaders in your department in terms of shaping programs and policies? And how might adopting Authentic Cariño as a framework reshape how decisions get made in your department and unit?
Thank you, Savi. Thank you so much, Gio and Josie. If we could send some affirmations their way, they've been working on this for many months now, and conceptualizing and theorizing with the rest of our team. We definitely welcome at this point any reflections based on the questions that Gio and Josie post for us, as well as any general questions. We invite you to unmute or drop them in the chat. Yeah, this is our time to be in dialogue together. Thank you for the affirmations in the chat. Any comments, any questions from our audience?
I have a comment. Hi, my name is Olga and I'm a guest, but I'm also a UCSC alumna. And it was such an amazing presentation. I am like, my jaw dropped, I don't know how many times throughout the presentation, to see the confidence, how you presented the information, reflects the acompañamiento that Josephine was talking about that student interns have received in El Centro. I was not part of El Centro during my time at UCSC. I would walk by it all the time. But I was a commuter, so I was always there for class and would leave, so did not benefit from all the services and support that El Centro provides to students. And I'm very happy to see how they are providing this space for not just for the student interns, but for any student that wants to come and find a safe space to be validated, to be seen, to be heard, and to connect with other students and staff on campus. The questions that are posed here at the end in terms of how do we do this self-reflection about our own serviceness makes me think of the small things that we do every day that may seem small, but that add up to those individual acts of love, but we need to multiply them, right? That we sometimes show more in the way we do things than how we say them. And just wanted to share that. Thank you for the opportunity to see this presentation. Thank you for all you do at El Centro. And yeah, thank you, Jocelyn and Gio, because it was a fabulous presentation. And sorry for not introducing myself. My name is Olga Diaz and I work at Cabrillo College.
Hello, Olga. And thank you so much for your affirmations.
Thank you.
Let's see. I saw there was a comment in the chat or a question from Julia. How do we advocate for transfer student retention? Do y'all have any thoughts?
Yes. I can speak to that a bit. In my time here so far and in my role specifically, I'm able to oversee the transfer student programming interns and transfer and transitional student programming interns. So that points to like the transfer student experience, which full transparency, I'm not a transfer student myself, but the people who are on my team are. And the way that has happened here so far and through other consistent programming throughout the years before my time, there is a lot of like cross collaboration with the transfer student programming center. And one of the ideas that I wanted to highlight and one of the programs that has happened or will continue to happen is these spaces for like convivencia y comunidad. So in these programs, we try to gauge a lot of what factors have contributed to like the growth and support of transfer student experience and what has also been a continuous barrier, and just taking the time to like have those face-to-face connections has been really essential to understanding that, and will continue to inform that in the future as well.
Yeah. I'll just add that I think there's a lot of really great work with like our transfer receptive work happening with like Saskia's Casanova and her lab, as well as some of the HSI folks here, and I think there's a lot of knowledge. So I definitely encourage those of you that are involved with that work to share any other consejos about advocating for our transfer students. I did receive a question or a comment. Josie, if you can stop screen sharing so we can see each other. There we go. What other questions or thoughts do y'all have?
I just want to thank you, Xiomara, for all that you do at El Centro. I know that my daughter Giovanna, I'm Giovanna's mom, by the way. I know that Giovanna is very happy working in such a meaningful environment. And as part of my experience as an immigrant, single mom, and Latina in higher education, I feel that programs like this important, especially if you come to this country in your late 20s, just like my case, I didn't know any better. Like back in a couple of years ago when I was looking for learning English through undergrad and then grad school. So for me, it was more um, different experience, the academia here. And I felt that in order to fit in, I had to remove my cultural identity. I thought that having an accent was a weakness instead of one of my strengths. Knowing more than one language, it felt intimidating at times because I was like in rooms where I had to focus more on my pronunciation at that at some point than in the content of the several presentations that I made going through grad school. So having that support system in the Latino community, I feel is very important for people that are immigrants and wish to enroll in school or have a better future for themselves, not only for their kids. So I feel that what you guys do is very, very important and meaningful for all our students.
Gracias, Maria.
Mhm.
And thank you for raising an amazing and letting her spend some time here with us. But I think as we've shared, we really see this as like a multi-generational, bendición for our students to be here, to occupy space, to graduate, and then, do what it is they want to in the world. Thank you for that. I know we're almost out of time, Veronica.
So I know it's almost, I guess, say it's just a shout out to the other folks who are here that are in academic advising. As somebody who gets to work that works in all of the academic programs, I know I see you, and I also see the ones that aren't here, and I think that all of that matters, right? Anything that you brought here that you've shared, for me, the question, our student population, um, closer to like 60% students of color, and our staff population is the opposite. Part of the challenge and the question is how do we bring, of approach, and how do we put it into practice in spaces that may feel very different? Yet, especially in those spaces, it becomes really important because it's the folks that are interfacing and interacting with students every day, right? Currently, nobody graduates without advisor approving that graduation. Nobody gets declared without an academic advisor moving those declarations. So it's like such critical facing folks that I think, again, a shout out to those that are here. And also for me in the work that I do, especially right now with the major initiative on the campus for us transforming advising, I feel like I'm part of that core team. And so I definitely will take everything that you all have brought here, but also you all will publish the recording or share it. So I feel like we need to link it in our transforming advising final report and say to those that are making final decisions on this, you need to see this before you make your final decisions, because a lot of folks will be hearing from faculty, will be hearing from staff, will be hearing from a lot of different voices that may be saying don't change anything or leave things as they are. But I think that you all here make the case for the need for a transformative campus-wide approach to thinking about advising, which is very different than where we're at right now. And I know that that's very scary for a lot of people, but I really want to lean into that in a lot of ways. So maybe the Senate, as Rebecca put in the chat, but like, how do we do that? We have our annual forum? How do we, you all already recorded this, so how do we leverage this? And I feel like I can take that into a lot of spaces.
Thank you so much, Veronica. And that's exactly what we need, right? Those of us that are here to help share this model and these frameworks, right? Okay, I see we're at time. Yexoa, you want to quickly share or ask?
Yeah, hi everybody. Josie and Dio, you probably remember me. I was at ASI with you as well. And again, fabulous job, great job. I was really impressed with how you were able to speak about theory in such a eloquent way, right? As undergraduate students, it's not something you see a lot or all the time. So I'm thoroughly impressed. One of the things I also wanted to, I don't have a question, but I wanted to also comment is this acknowledgement of that period of assimilation and how much it really impacts, those. And this, I'm talking about myself because I grew up during the period of like, you needed to assimilate. It was expected. It was written about. It was researched. And that was what I was having to read about. And so to go through this shift now where it's about validation and that we can bring our whole selves, it's beautiful. But I will say this at the same time, it's a little scary. It's actually a lot scary. So the fact that I wear my feather earrings, it's a meaningful statement, to wear them to work. It's a meaningful statement to wear my huipil to work, whereas in the past I hadn't. So I really appreciate that you brought that context, that history into it, because as higher education has shifted and transformed over the years, we see what the work still requires. So thank you for being in the work. Thank you for being engaged in the work. And I'm just really proud of all of the students that were involved in that research.
Josie and Gio, any closing thoughts?
Oh, yes. So many hearts. Thank you for all of the statements and reflections. It truly is so meaningful to share all of this space with you and hear how much you care as well, because that is what this is at the end of the day. It's a system of care that we are trying to implement when so many things are always like moving and revolving and being swept under the rug in our faces. And a little bit of my testimony as well. I honestly don't know where I would be without El Centro and programs like this, and without like the amazing leaders that I found on this campus, because I find that Santa Cruz is still that place that has a radical sense of spirit and has truly shifted my worldview so that I can imagine things like this being the future. We're living that shift right now, but there's still like so much more that I feel is possible because of this space and the theory that we're able to access as well. So yeah, students do want to be in the spaces. We do want to have positions and voice in things that may seem so far from us or super hierarchical. And so I'm really excited to see how this plays out and is implemented further.
Yeah, I also wanted to say thank you to everyone here. And I was trying to think of, I feel like there's a quote that goes with like sometimes like the most like I guess like the growth happens where like you have the most fear. I don't know what the quote is, but something like that. Or I guess in terms of like it's a lot to like want to recognize that our institutions are so like deeply rooted in these things, and it takes even more to like recognize that like maybe we've been conditioned to like so it's not easy. It's definitely a process. But yeah, for listening in and for doing this work, and also thank you to my team watching.
We have a whole ERC party going on. So thank you all for joining, and we will stop recording. Thank you.